Derrick Fernandez. I've been at HDR maybe a little over 3 years now. I'm pretty sure I'll talk about myself more during the presentation, so I won't go too deep into myself. Do we have, like, what's the size of your firms? Is it small, medium, large?
Large.
Big.
Super big? Really big? Yeah?
Big, really big.
Big, really big? All right, that's great then. And are you guys, like, what type of positions do you have? Are you BIM managers, leadership?
Design technology leader.
Okay. BIM managers? Okay. All right, I don't want to talk too bad about people that get mad at me. So.
There's a couple of directors over here as well, I know. So
Oh, we got directors?
Don't
Okay.
get out to that.
All right, I'll keep it PC for them. Did you guys throw that in?
Oh, yeah.
I think I did. Yeah.
Look at me.
I know.
I hope I don't have the same thing on. No.
You look good, man. You look better there.
All right, so I'm actually a senior space planner at dRofus. At
All right. Yeah.
I've been doing too much dRofus. But I've taken on the position of application manager for dRofus for all of HDR. I have background in architecture. I'm a registered architect. I've worked on the technology side, so I've done production, I've done implementation, I've done it all, so it kind of just fit, right? HDR, who is HDR? We were founded in 1917. We're a huge company. We're based out of Nebraska, in Omaha. We have over 10,000 plus employees. We're actually broken up into different services. So there's architecture, there's consulting and planning, resources, transportation, water, wastewater management, gas and oil. So really what we focused on is the architecture side, the AEC side, utilizing dRofus. We didn't get into all those other services yet. So right now I'm really going to focus on what we did with the AEC side within HDR, right? All right, so difficulties of having a huge company is that you have a ton of different market sectors, you have different focuses, you have different ways of doing work based off the type of project it might be, right? So at HDR we have civic, education, healthcare, judicial, science and technology. We started with healthcare, and really the way that we started with dRofus is that a client made it mandatory that we use dRofus. And for that project, it worked, but I don't think it worked as successfully as it should have been. Because we didn't really use dRofus in the most efficient manner, like we brought it in straight out of the box and tried to put it on a project, we had a lot of difficulties with the project that we had to go back and fix after the fact. So I'm going to tell you guys, how we've changed since then to make it a more efficient and easier process, right? So that's one of the difficulties. We have all those different market sectors. Another difficulty is that we're a global company. So we're everywhere. We're here in the US, we're in Germany, Australia, China, London. So one of the difficulties we run across when, customizing dRofus is the language barriers, the way that different market sectors work and different regions work. So in the US, we get really specific. We get down to the minute details. Where in Germany, it's more generic. They keep it at an upper level and then let the clients do the minute details of selecting things. So we had to take that into account as we were customizing dRofus because we wanted to build it for everyone, not just one particular market sector or one particular region, right? So that's just some of the difficulties that we've run across as far as the process that we've done, the languages that occur between different market sectors and so on and so forth. So we put into a process of how to overcome those difficulties. And the first step was assigning Overwatch. So essentially, I'm Overwatch for HDR.
Fighter pilot.
Yeah. That's how I act.
That's how you see yourself.
I take people out all the time. So what we did is we decided, all right, we're going to have one person that oversees the implementation. And that person doesn't have to be a data management expert. They don't have to be the best architect. Essentially, what you want that person to be is someone who can relate to all aspects that we have to put into dRofus. So they have to be able to speak to the architecture side, the interior side, equipment planners, the branding, the graphics, everything that we want to get out of it, how we're going to train people, all that kind of stuff. You want your Overwatch person not to necessarily have to be an expert in all those, but to understand all of those different aspects. Because essentially what you want to do is have that person manage how we implement this and how we customize this so that it fits for everyone, right? We don't want to just have somebody who's thinking only on the interior side, or only on the equipment planner side, or only on the electrical implementation of it, right? You want somebody who could understand all aspects, and then have that person sit in on each of those implementations so that there's a consistency between all of those different sectors, right? You want that consistent base for dRofus. Sure, you're going to have different projects where you have to customize it based off a client's need or something like that, but you still want to have that consistent base throughout all aspects of dRofus. So that's what the Overwatch person does. I don't know what I wrote up there, but you guys can read those aspects of who I think I am, I guess. Second thing we did is the Overwatch person went out to all the different teams, right? So what I did was I went to the different teams and gathered their current process and then thought about that current process and try to decide how we would put that into dRofus. Because right now, you always hear from each person on the team, well, that's not how we do it. Or this is how we do it, right? And it's fine that they have a current process, but that current process isn't always the best process. So essentially what we wanted to do was, we didn't want just everyone to be effective, but we wanted them to be efficient while being effective. So that's where we took in their thoughts, how they work right now, and then determined the next steps of how we create a better process utilizing dRofus. Another thing with going out to those teams is that it gives them some kind of ownership. It gives them a feeling that they had their thoughts put into what we implement. It's not us just giving them something to say, hey, you have to use this. Now we've taken exactly what they wanted to do, customize it into dRofus, and now they feel like they've been part of the process, right? They've had their thoughts put into the process that we put into place. So it gives them some kind of ownership of this new tool that we're going to use. Instead of just saying, hey, you're using this, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, get to it, right? And then the third aspect was the customization. And I know there's another session later that'll talk more about customization, but essentially we took everything that we've gathered through all the different teams and started implementing those changes to the way we use dRofus. So if it's in the room data information that we collect, the hardware information or the door information we collect, or the item specifications or the reports that we generate, all of it we customize directly in dRofus based off what we came up with from those different workflow teams. So I'll leave the customization to this speech later on. And then after the customization, we went back to those teams and implemented the process. So this is an example of medical equipment workflow, right? So we talked about, when you start a project, do you have a program? Is the program just rooms in Revit? Is it a real program you got from a client? Because our equipment planners don't necessarily work on projects that are within HDR. Sometimes they get projects outside of HDR. So we had to include all of that in the process steps for them. So if they were getting a project from somewhere outside of HDR, how do they get those rooms into dRofus so that they could start doing their equipment planning, right? So all of those kind of things came into play as we built up their workflow. And then we go out, implement that process, and start to train those different groups. So as Overwatch, I'm kind of in charge of training also. And what I've done is I've actually gone and in each of the groups, I've kind of created a sub Overwatch, somebody else that could manage just that group and then kind of report back to me, so that I have these experts in these different areas that can take on some of the tasks that might come back to me ultimately, right? Because you don't want just one person with all the knowledge. You want to spread that knowledge. You want to get other people at different levels to pass that knowledge on, right? So what I would do is go to the different groups. We would do training, if it's just the user training or if it's the advanced training for the higher ups that are going to be doing more of the support within their group or whatever it may be. But that's a big step, that implementation. How do you actually start to put those processes into place, right? All right, so I'm going to finalize with just steps to success. Easiest step is just hire me. HDR people don't. You didn't hear that? You didn't hear that?
It's not like this is being broadcast live or anything.
Now, so steps to success. First and most important step to me is getting backing from your upper management. Backing from upper management doesn't mean, hey, we bought dRofus and we got you guys some training, get it worked out. That's not backing. Upper management needs to be involved. They need to understand the process. They need to understand the timeline and be able to give the support that's needed to really implement the tool. Upper management can't just say, all right, hey, we've shelled out some money for dRofus and we got you guys some training, y'all should be good to go. No, they need to really be involved. And if they're not involved, if it's just the BIM managers or just the users that really want to push this, and upper management really doesn't care, it's not really going to succeed. You have to really get upper management to have backing and really push it also. We kind of experienced that when Revit first came out, right? We had all these people that wouldn't give up AutoCAD. Revit was a better tool, but they were stuck in their ways. AutoCAD was the best way to go, right? Well, it took us losing projects or not being able to fulfill schedules because we were doing it an old way instead of the new, more efficient way. And essentially it took upper management to say, hey, we're done with AutoCAD, we're taking it off your computers, you got to use Revit. So to me, that was the best way to get people really to use it, because otherwise people get stuck in their old habits and don't want to switch to something new because it will inconvenience them for right now, but they don't really think about down the line. So really you need upper management to understand and give you the full backing that you need to make this a successful implementation, right? Step number 2 is assigning that Overwatch, right? Getting the right people, and it doesn't have to be one person, it can be multiple people, but just make sure you have those people in place that understand all the aspects and can keep it consistent across the board. Because ultimately what you want to do is have a strong base so that when you do your customization on a project basis, underneath it's still the same, right? And one of the things where we really wanted to push this standardization is because we're taking our projects and they're starting to do benchmarking from it. And the best way to do benchmarking is if everything's apples to apples, right? So what we're doing is as we're finishing up our projects in dRofus, we're pulling them out, putting them into a SQL database so that we could do benchmarkings and all the projects resemble each other. We could pull the data that we need very simply and easily because now it's structured the same way. It has the same data formats and all that kind of things, right? So if you have that process in place and you're standardized at the base level, it makes it easier to do things like that.
Can I ask a question on that?
Sure.
On this team that you've developed, did you find that the people that have evolved into these roles tended to be kind of the technology BIM managers, or more of the planners, architects, or some hybrid? Or
It's funny, there isn't one specific person. It's been just the people who really want to do it. Like, in every group, there's always one gung-ho person. Like, oh, I really like this. I want to do more and test this out. And really, it comes naturally, those people. And then once you kind of identify, hey, these people really get it, then you could push them more and give them more training and give them the background and get them to stand on their own and push it, right? So really, it comes naturally, just based off their
But it hasn't
attitude.
necessarily been BIM managers?
No, it hasn't. It hasn't been one particular type of person or
Cool.
role.
Yep.
It's been pretty open. Step 3 was engaging experts in those different fields. Make sure you get their input so that they feel like they've been part of it, right? Let's see. Collaboration with your workflow. Make sure you're keeping all the teams in mind. Don't just focus on one team, because you're going to spend way too much time on that one team and then realize when you go to a second team, they need to do it completely different, and I didn't think about this in the first aspect. So make sure you're thinking about all those different workflows when you're putting them in place. Another thing with collaboration and rolling out, make sure you document your process. That's a big step that I probably should have made its own slide. Essentially, for each of the different teams, they may have their own workflow. They kind of follow the same lines, but they do some things different. Make sure you document that process. Like the medical equipment team that we have, they've actually created a master medical equipment database. So it's 20,000 items in this database. So it's manufacturer-specific information, all the details, all the specifications, cut sheets, everything. So they maintain this master database. And then as they go to each project, they pull from the master database into the projects, right? From this equipment list. And essentially, that whole process had to be documented, because I could teach a group, they could do it successfully, but as soon as a new person comes on board or somebody leaves, the information gets lost, and then nobody knows what's going on. So make sure you document the process, document everything, and continuously update that document. So as you change processes, or if you add a new step in, make sure that document's always up to date. Because, if Overwatch leaves, you still want to have that information to get back into, right?
You mentioned your medical equipment team. Did you find that some teams were easier to absorb their workflows and transfer into dRofus?
I don't think they were easier. I think they were more eager to get into dRofus.
Yeah.
So it's probably something else I should have put in the slides. I wouldn't try to implement every aspect of dRofus at one single time. Take steps. Figure out what aspects are most important, implement those, and then continue implementing others and others. Like, we started with just room validation between dRofus and Revit and room data sheets. That was the first need for dRofus, right? So we implemented that process. And then we implemented medical equipment and equipment going into dRofus. Now we're implementing finishes and furniture. And then ultimately we want to get to procurement and stuff like that. But it's impossible to try to implement everything at one single time. Figure out what's most important, implement those, then figure out what's next in your line of things that you want to really get out of dRofus. Because it's overwhelming to try to implement everything at one single time. dRofus has a ton of different modules and things that you could utilize it for. So it's, you don't have to use everything. Use what's most important, implement that, and then continue implementing aspects as you need them, right? Yep, I probably should have waited to that point to say that. Last thing I'm gonna say is that it's always evolving. Like, we came up with a process. The process might work for one instance. It may not work for the next 3 instances. So make sure that you're updating your workflow and your process based off what's best for the team. Like, find out what's consistently happening as you're using dRofus, and then fix that and update your documentation and your workflow so that you don't run into those issues again. Because really, software is always changing. Like, the new version of dRofus came out, and I had to change all of my documentation. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Everything was completely different, but it was better, right? So it's just something I had to do. Thank you. You guys
Job
owe me.
security.
Somebody owed me something, right? But it's continuously, improving. So you need to improve with it. You need to make sure your process improves with it. And if that means your process has to change it. Because ultimately, it's probably going to be more efficient that way, right? Remember, we want to be efficient over just effective. So I think that's it.
Cool.